Welcome to the Joe Cohen Show. Join me as I share my experience with biohacking and invite top health experts to explore the latest technology, supplements, research, and resources for optimizing your body and brain. Women, I feel like, are generally more colder than men. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's just like stereotype or whatnot. Women are always cold, like, oh, I'm freezing.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it seemed like I was just understanding it, the higher heat, meaning like they get warmer. So, or
No.
they're getting colder.
So
What's happening?
yeah, so the if we're talking about women like in an office, right? And it's always said at 20 degrees C as the general room temperature. So women perceive that as being cold because their cutaneous vasodilation set points are different than men. So we're seeing like there's a difference in the amount of core to shell gradient, right? So men can produce more heat, stay warmer, primarily because they have more lean mass and metabolically active tissue, but there's also the
Mm.
sex difference in our set point of thermal neutral. When we get into exercise and we see exercise heat capacity. So when you exercise, you increase the amount of heat that you are storing and trying to get rid of because of your contractile muscle tissue, right? So every time you do a muscle contraction, you're using fuel, you're breaking down the fuel and you're releasing heat. So when we look at heat tolerance per unit of workload between men and women store more heat and they accumulate more heat and they have a different means of dissipating the heat than men. So women first vasodilate and try to get rid of the heat through just that, conduction where it's like, okay, we're pushing all the hot blood to the skin and the wind and touching things is going to get rid of it. Men don't do that as much. They have a very short time for vasodilation and then they start sweating. But women don't sweat as soon as men and they hold on to more heat. So their tipping point for sweating is a higher internal temperature than men as well. So when we're looking at heat tolerance and the way that women can handle heat during exercise, it's different than men. So women, because they are doing more vasodilation, they have a greater internal temperature before they start sweating. They actually do better in hot and humid conditions than men because men rely more on sweating. So when we get into the high hormone phase where progesterone's increasing that core temperature, women's time to fatigue is shorter because they already have a higher core temperature. So their ability to hold on to heat is not as great because first it's driving the core temperature up to a set point before they start sweating. But because the core temperature is already up, they're holding on to heat. Their sweating cold changes. So it might start earlier, but their capacity to offload more heat through sweat is different than men. So it becomes a little bit of a thermoregulation challenge when progesterone is elevated.
As I'm understanding it, there's there's benefits to how women can tolerate heat, and both men and women obviously are dissipating heat, but they do it in
Yeah.
different ways. So men are doing
Yes.
it more through sweating. Women are
Yes.
doing it more through vasodilation. That's
Yes.
that's what I understood. And when you do it more through vasodilation, that actually helps you tolerate heat better because men are only going to tolerate it after they start sweating, whereas women don't have to sweat. They can sweat later. It'll have to be hotter in order for them to sweat. So how does that relate to, for example, the ability to tolerate cold? Because men are, you're mentioning that when the men are naturally have more muscle mass, right? And so
Mhm.
that's how they also, not only through sweating, but they're also burning it through the muscle mass.
So we look at cold tolerance, there's a gradient difference for what's tolerable to men versus tolerable for women. And we see this also in like cold water immersion, where women have a stronger vasal response if their face gets in the cold water and a stronger shock response because they're used to vasodilating for temperature control. And then they have this severe vasoconstriction, what causes us panic. So if we're
Mm.
looking at cold tolerance, Women will go out for like a run in the middle of winter and have gloves on and a hat on, and they might come back and not be sweaty because they've been able to thermoregulate more through that vasoconstriction, dilation property than the actual sweat. But a man will come back with his gloves off and his hat off and dripping wet with sweat, right?
That's for sure. Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's a gradient difference. And then again, when we look at like cold water immersion, you have all these ice baths, and let's get into this 4 degrees C water. Women get in there and they have this immediate constriction response, and they don't get the same benefits as men from cold water immersion because it's
Oh,
too
that's so
cold.
interesting. Wow.
It's too
Okay.
cold. So for women, the cold water for proper like health benefits should really be around 14 degrees C, because then that invokes the responses that we want without over shocking the body.
Right. So that would be like go into the Mediterranean Sea rather than the fjords
The
in
Arctic.
in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Arctic or
Yeah.
Wim Hof or wherever he is in Iceland. Who
Yeah,
knows?
exactly.
That's interesting. Okay. And what about saunas? How should the
So
temperature be in
saunas,
saunas?
yeah. So saunas are fantastic. We do see a sex difference also in acclimatization to the heat of the sauna, right? So we know that it'll take 9 sessions in a row for a woman to get the same benefits as men have 5 sessions in a row. And this is primarily because of that core temperature difference between menstrual cycle phases. So it takes longer for the body to have those shifts in cardiovascular responses and heat shock protein responses, because the woman's body is already used to having this 0.5-ish degree change. So when we're
Mm,
looking at sauna exposure, it's all about driving the core temperature up to create this heat response. But women's bodies are so used to an internal temperature shift that it takes more exposure for them to get the same kind of benefit that men have.
interesting. And what if they just turn the temperature higher?
Still the same thing.
Okay.
It's just they have less tolerance to stay in there for a longer period of time.
Okay. Are there the same benefits for cold in for men and women? It's just that they have to do different temperatures?
When we look at kind of the health benefits between cold and heat, women do better in the heat
So better women should are more likely to do better with saunas than cold
than
immersion.
cold water. Yeah.
That's why I personally always recommend not flossing. Why? Wait a
You
second.
recommend not flossing?
Wait. If everything is perfect,
Okay.
in the natural world, when everything would be perfect, you don't need unnaturally to floss. But as soon as your diet is not in check, you live in an unnatural world and you had previous dental work done and periodontitis and gingivitis, you probably need to floss. That's sad. But ideally, obviously, there is no tooth floss growing on the tree. This is also an invention that you don't need. And I have one point for the tooth flossing, why I think for somebody with healthy teeth is unnecessary and maybe even bad. It's because sometimes you're not as handy and you rip through. So you cut and you bleed afterwards. And you don't bleed because you're so gentle, but because you're always cutting through. And this is the same thing as you would cut your skin always open. What do you open here? It's called leaky gum. It's the same as leaky gut. You basically open your whole system because gingiva is outside body. It's tissue to protect. If you open up the barrier by cutting it all day long, bacteria go in there. And this is how they find Porphyromus gingivalis in your synovial fluid of your hip joint. So why would you do that? Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so that's really cool. So you're saying I've never thought about that. That's pretty mind-blowing information where you're saying when we floss and we bleed, that causes the bacteria to then go in the bloodstream and cause problems.
Wait, if you had like myself, I have perfect natural gums. I never bleed, nothing. Only time I bleed is if I use a floss and rip it through because it's stuck in between and then it snatches. If I'm very, very gentle, I'm good with my hands. I can floss without ripping it open. But I
Do
know
you
most
floss every day?
no, I don't even floss at all.
You never
I know,
floss?
no.
Wow.
No, no
Dr.
way.
Dome, the dentist, does not floss. Let's that's incredible. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, wait, but it's all natural and I'm super optimized. My diet is on point and I have no things. The thing is, if you have if you're now listening for the first time to health optimization and you think this guy is crazy. And I bleed all the time. If you have a lot of inflammation in your gum right now from your diet and from all the soft food sticking there into your dental work, please floss a little bit, because actually then flossing helps you against the bleeding. Understand? If you have massively inflamed chronic gingivitis, so gum disease and periodontitis, you probably need to floss right now until you're at that level where you can go back to nature. Ideally, you do not floss in nature. So if I have something stuck in between, I might use a floss, or I personally like these sticks, like the usual interdental, what is it? Interdental picks, or what do you call it? The tooth picks?
Toothpicks? Yeah, the wooden ones?
Toothpick, yeah. Yeah, why not?
The toothpick.
If I have a
Okay.
one there, yeah, do the toothpick. Take it
Interesting.
out.
It reminds me of sun. Like, I think what you're saying is, if you floss and you're bleeding, you're doing it the wrong way. Number one, right? And I would say probably you might need more vitamin K. But
I would say,
besides,
first of all,
yeah.
you need, yes, maybe vitamin K. First of all, if you have perfect teeth and everything is not inflamed, and then you floss and it bleeds, bad idea. If you have a lot of inflammation and your gums bleed, you need to floss, probably because you have a lot of bacteria and the wrong things there. So that's two things. But you need nutrients. I would say number one would be omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin C, because you need collagenases to get activated by vitamin C and omega-3 fatty acids to be anti-inflammatory. If you Google periodontal disease and omega-3s, funny enough, you find 300 plus studies in a second. This is really good. A lot of studies from Egypt. So omega-3 is really, really good. You know it is anti-inflammatory, the
Right.
EPA content of it.
Okay, and so, I mean, I'm still gonna be flossing. I mean, I don't bleed when I floss, though, just to be clear. So that's important, right?
That's really important that you be handy with it, but you can also use tiny interdental brushes. You don't want to have food stuck in your teeth, for sure. You don't want to,
Okay.
but you are optimizing, like your diet. You don't have the fur on your teeth, right? You're not drinking Coke all day long, or
No.
have a lot of starchy vegetables that always stick to your teeth.
No.
Because this is the groundwork for bacteria living on your teeth and building plaque and calculus. So
Right.
then please floss, do that. No worries. I'm also the guy saying you should never use any chemical mouthwashes.
That
These
was my
also-
next question. Tell me about mouthwashes. Why is chemical mouthwash not good, and what should people use?
So see your mouth as the entrance to the tube that goes from here to the back door. Yeah, it's like the entrance to your whole body. And what do you have in the mouth? It's like a protection mechanism. It's the biggest immune system, is the most diversified microbiome. Do you want to disinfect your microbiome on a daily basis with something full of alcohol and chemical ingredients? I don't think so. Why would you not rather soothe it and improve it through, let's say, coconut oil pulling? So it's just unnecessary, and it's actually bad. So for example, chlorhexidine, like stuff that they put into standard rinses, is shown to activate metallomatrix proteinases, which actually open up gums.
Mm,
Come on.
interesting. So you would go with just kind of gargling oil, whether it's olive oil or coconut oil. Is that correct?
The three superhuman oral healthcare strategies I say is you use a toxin-free toothpaste, you do coconut oil pulling instead of the chemical mouthwashes, and a copper tongue scraper. That's basically enough.
Okay, so out of all the drugs that you've tested or compounds, sure, which do any of them perform better than rapamycin? You mentioned this 17 alpha is kind of like similar. Do any of them perform better than rapamycin?
A paper just came out in which we broke our own personal group record, and it was from a combination of drugs, rapamycin plus acarbose. Rapamycin works great in males, acarbose works great in males, but if you give them both together, you do better than either drug alone. We can actually increase the median survival of the males by 29%. So that sets two records. It's the best we've ever done by giving anything to a mouse. And also it's the first example we have of a situation in which two drugs do better than either drug did alone. It's,
So you're saying in general, in general, there aren't many synergies within this longevity research that you're doing. So it's
We
like,
don't know. We're certainly hoping the answer is yes. There'll be tons of of synergies or at least additive effects. But it costs testing one drug costs money. Testing two drugs together costs the same amount of money. So we need to have a clear rationale for why a two drug combination may work better than either drug used alone. But there clearly are good ideas in that area, and we're testing a couple more combinations in the mice born this year. We're going to test a couple more combinations in the mice that will be born next year. So the general notion of using two at a time has a lot to recommend it. This 29% increase, just to put it into context, in 1990, J. Olshansky and his collaborators published a nice paper in Science. They asked, if nobody ever died of cancer, how much longer would people live? And they found out that the average American woman at that time would die at about 80 years of age. If she never, ever, ever got cancer after the age of 50, you're buying her 2.6 years. That is about a 3% extension. And if she never got a heart attack or a stroke, you're also buying her 2.7 years. So it's about 3%. So this drug combination is about 10 times better in terms of the proportion of extra life you get than a complete cure for cancer or a complete cure for heart attacks. So it's
wow.
actually, if we could get even a half of that or a third of that benefit in people, which is of course a big if, but if that worked out in terms of the number of healthy, active years of additional life you get, it's much better than a cure for cancer. I'm not against a cure for cancer, but I think the work we're doing has an awful lot more potential than a cure for cancer or a cure for heart attacks. I'm not just making that up and blowing smoke. It's based on our data.
Right. No, I think that's really great that you put it into that context. What curing cancer would do, what curing heart disease would do. You get like maybe 10% in total or 5, whatever it is exactly. Here you're talking about almost 30%. That could be a game changer. Just to give people a background of what acarbose is, or carbose, I'm not sure how to say it, but it's this drug they give to diabetics that blocks the uptake of glucose.
Yes.
And is that the mechanism by which it's extending aging? Do you think that it's
Good question.
decreasing blood glucose?
Yeah, good question. It doesn't exactly block the uptake of glucose. What it does is it blocks the breakdown of starches to glucose in your bowel. So if you eat 6 donuts for breakfast, if you don't have acarbose, you get a huge glucose spike because your intestines break the starch down, turn it into glucose, you absorb the glucose. If you've had acarbose, that breakdown is much, much slower. So glucose does go up in your blood, but it goes up much more slowly at a more gentle pace. And it never reaches the huge peak that you would get after your 5th or 6th donut out here in the real world. So we think that ability to block peak daily glucose is how acarbose works. And we think so in part because of the results we've just published on canagliflozin, published last year. Canagliflozin also, which is also used in human diabetics, also reduces peak glucose, but it doesn't work in the gut. It works in the kidney. It allows people who've had their 6 donuts to lose a lot of the extra glucose into the urine. So you can see how it would protect a diabetic person for whom high glucose levels are a serious threat. Since canagliflozin works great, although in males only, and acarbose works great, although better in male, it works in both sexes, but it's better in males than it is in females. It's a reasonable guess that the thing they have in common, which is blocking peak glucose levels, might be the mechanism. So we don't know that. We haven't proven that, but it's a reasonable guess.
To your book, Molly, because you obviously have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of interesting information there. And I want to talk about a topic that's very dear to my heart, which is the mitochondria and energy, which you speak about in your book as well. So people are missing energy in this day and age, right? They want to have more energy, and the powerhouses of our cells are the mitochondria. How do people get more energy? What are your top hacks for getting more energy?
Sure. So one of the things I want people to understand is that mitochondria are, of course, the powerhouses of the cell. but they're also kind of like the general contractors as well, because they actually decide where the energy goes and what is it and what do you do with it. So they're making a lot of decisions on a cellular level to actually figure out how to direct the energy properly throughout the cell, throughout the body. So they're really important. I mean, they literally help modulate the stress response, the immune response, the sexual function, the sex hormone production, do a lot of things besides just make energy. But generally speaking, when we eat food and we breathe air, we burn oxygen. We use the oxygen to burn the fuel to make energy. And it's in the form of an electrochemical gradient, which basically is like a battery, but also it's a capacitor. So it literally will deploy energy quickly. So you have this, this power plant, this battery, this capacitor, this signal transducer in your cell they're coming together regularly and they're communicating and then they're breaking apart. And they do this thing called mitochondrial biogenesis, which means they make more of themselves if they're sent the signals to do that. But they also we want to discard the ones that don't carry a charge. So that's what mitophagy is also known as. So a lot of what we want to optimize for is what's called mitochondrial quality control. Can we make sure that we have enough functioning mitochondria in the cell? Can we throw out the ones that are no longer functioning properly? And this is what I've kind of like spent a lot of my time in the last few years studying is like, how do you boost mitochondrial health and function? So one of the biggest ones you can do is and recovery. So exercise creates a signal to the cell that says, okay, so today I've done this much work. Tomorrow might be more challenging. So I'm going to actually prepare for tomorrow by predicting that tomorrow could be more challenging today because I got a signal that I got a challenge. So that's why we need to exercise, because we actually need to send the signal to our cells to make more energy. It's also another reason why, for example, before the podcast started, you did a bunch of push-ups. Doing intermittent exercise throughout the day, doing intermittent activity throughout the day is a great way to send those cellular signals to make more energy. So this is what I would call a mitohormetic stressor. So when we stress our cells by giving them a challenge, it can make us stronger. So mito means mitochondria. Hormesis is the process of becoming stronger with stress. So stress is not bad. It's just we need to recover from stress, which is why in my practice, I've seen women who are like bodybuilders and they were working out 7 days a week. And they came to me and they're like, my hormones are all over the place. And I'm like, well, what's going on with your fitness? Like, tell me more about your fitness, training. And she's like, well, I exercise every day for like 1 to 2 hours. And I was like, okay, well, you might want to consider taking a rest day. And recovery is really, really just as important to fitness as fitness is itself. And yeah, it's very overlooked by a lot of people, but there's a switch that happens. So there's the exercise and the recovery, which leads to improvement of cellular health. But there's a bunch of other mitohormetic stressors that you've probably heard of, but that you may not see it in this way. One of them is also cold plunge and heat. So like part of the reason why you're seeing cold plunges and saunas showing up in more and more gyms is because people are doing this rotation of cold and hot and cold and hot. And that is actually sending the signal to the cell to adapt to those demands. So that's another one of those stressors. It's also really what I learned during the pandemic was like, if I go outside and I work out in cold weather, I can actually train my body to handle cold more effectively. And I used to be really sensitive to cold, but now my cells have adapted because of the stress that I placed on them, and they can handle cold now, which is really interesting. So we can teach our body to handle stress by giving it stress. And temperature stress is one of those mitohormetic stressors, those switches that we can flip. And then there's also things like hypoxia, hyperoxia. So like breathwork practices are really great for sending the signal to the mitochondria to adapt to those demands. So a lot of what breathwork involves is hyperventilation and then breath holding. But then there's also people who go free diving or do, like high altitude training, and they're basically teaching their mitochondria to properly handle these different stressors so that they can become stronger. And so what I write about in the book is that there's a bunch of toggling of mitohormetic stressors. There's cold plunge and heat, there's fasting and feasting. So a lot of people also never fast. They're just eating all day long and they're snacking all day long. And it's really important that we actually create space between meals and create space between, sleep and food. And not just like a lot of people eat in the middle of the night or eat late in the middle of the night when they're working late. And that's not great for metabolism either. So the feasting and the fasting and what's called flipping the metabolic switch, going from carb to fat metabolism is another mitohormetic stressor. So just going into ketosis and then going back into carb metabolism, that switch trains the cell to metabolize different fuels more effectively. And, then there's also things like high pressure and low pressure, as I mentioned. So HBOT. One of the reasons why HBOT, hyperbaric chambers, work so well for mitochondrial health is that they put you at high oxygen at high pressure, and then they relieve the pressure and lower the oxygen. And that is sensed by the cell as hypoxia. So the cell senses that pressure difference and that oxygen difference. And it basically, there's this thing called hypoxia inducible factor that gets activated. And so learning how to send these signals properly to the cell will literally train your body to handle more stress and to create the conditions where you can actually thrive and become more energized.
That's awesome. So those are all your top mitochondrial enhancer optimizations,
Another
right?
one
There's-
would be also like psychosocial stress is good. Like some psychosocial stress is good. So if you have healthy relationships, even if you have a healthy family, it can be slightly stressful to spend time with people, right? Like, especially if you're an introvert. I'm an extrovert, so I love spending time with people. But we need human connection to thrive. We also need alone time to thrive. So psychosocial interaction and time alone, I would also consider to be a mitohormetic stressor because you're getting quite a lot of signals from your environment when you're around people. I think overcoming social challenges is a really important skill that we all should learn. But I also think it's really important to develop your tribe of people around you that make you feel safe, because oxytocin, as you've been writing about lately, is a really important antioxidant. It's an anti-inflammatory, it's mitoprotective, and it's cardioprotective. So it seems that love actually, on a cellular level, is conducive to longevity. And I think the core pathway for that is probably dopamine and oxytocin based.
I know a lot of people that get sick like every 2 months. It's not like even uncommon.
I'm like that, but I never actually get sick because I have a cold prevention protocol that works.
What's the full cold prevention protocol?
Well, I usually don't use it because the step one is so effective. So step one is to suck on zinc acetate lozenges and to run povidone iodine through my nose. You have to be proactive enough to recognize that the first suspicious sneeze is a symptom. If you're convinced you have a cold, you've probably had symptoms for like 2 days. And then it's probably useless to try to prevent viral replication because you already hit peak.
Interesting. This is really interesting. I'm
But
like,
I
this
don't
is
do that. If I get a sneeze that I find suspicious, well, at least it depends how suspicious it is. But if I have one sneeze and that outside the context of what seems like a normal sneeze to me, I'll just spray some betadine into my nose and it'll probably go away.
what else is part of, like, what are some of your top hacks in the initial stage? Zinc acetate, betadine,
An
which is
antiseptic
povidone iodine.
and zinc acetate is the full like level 1 biohack, and then vitamins A and D are the next most important thing.
If somebody has, like, let's say my serum vitamin A, do you think you should still take vitamin A?
Yeah,
Or my serum vitamin D? My serum vitamin D is 61 nanograms per deciliter, which is, I don't think anyone would say that that's not high enough.
I would say it would be optional. Well, I mean, first of all, I would expect you to get sick less as a result of that. But I bet you anything that if you measure your serum levels over the course of an illness, let's say you don't. And by the way, like I said before, if you do the first step one appropriately, you shouldn't need step two. And so if your nutrient status is very well optimized, and so your immune function is really good, and then you also add step one when you think you're getting sick, you're probably not going to wind up in a position where you're doing vitamins A and D that much. But I bet you anything, if you do get a full-blown illness, that you're going to watch your serum levels of those vitamins drop rapidly through the first few days. And if you let it get very serious, it's just going to keep going down. So we have actually really good data for vitamin D.
You're basically saying that even if you're not deficient, your body can significantly lower the levels of these vitamins. So you want to make sure that you're getting enough of them. What else is on that sheet that you think is like pretty important?
Yeah, I mean, we're now getting into sort of stage 3. So a source of omega-3 fatty acids such as cod liver oil, fish oil, algal DHA for vegans or fish. A source of omega-6 fatty acids such as egg yolks and liver, or an arachidonic acid supplement, which is derived from a certain mushroom.
Every day I take 20 grams of hydrolyzed collagen for it supplies glycine.
Okay.
It's beneficial for skin and joint health. And the literature is pretty clear that the collagen peptides are what drive the benefits in joint and skin health, and that these benefits are not obtained by simply eating other forms of protein.
Okay.
Now, that collagen isn't going to drive muscle protein synthesis, so it can't be used as like a primary protein source. But I think of it like sand in a jar. If you have a jar and you fill it with big rocks that are like your good sources of protein, like your animal protein or your protein powders, or even protein from a variety of plants, you fill up this jar to meet your daily requirements, but you still have all this, like these gaps around these rocks. Collagen, by supplying amino acids that are not present in high amounts in other proteins like glycine and hydroxyproline, and by supplying actual peptides specific to collagen, it fills up these gaps and really just completes the body by giving it everything it needs. So
Interesting. Yeah.
20
Let's
grams.
see. I'm curious how many benefits offhand, without looking up, you can kind of think about for glycine while you take it. I'm just curious, like,
For glycine or for collagen?
yeah, for glycine.
For glycine specifically, it's necessary for the synthesis of glutathione. And in fact, you can measure glycine deficiency by measuring urine levels of that thing that starts with an O, which is when your body cannot actually complete glutathione synthesis. So glutathione is one of the first things your body stops making when you're low in glycine.
Okay.
Long-term effects are you need glycine to create collagen all throughout the body, which makes up 80% of the protein in the body. So that's going to have detriments on your skin, your bones, thinking like osteoporosis, for skin, thinking like wrinkling and lower hydration and elasticity. And then just your joints and ligaments, you're going to need collagen in order to keep those strong.
Okay.
And then, of course, just the general structure of every cell. They all use collagen-based filaments to hold cell structure. Glycine is also needed to help your body balance methylation, although, most people undermethylate rather than overmethylate. So this is not a concern for most people. I would argue it's a big concern for most health-focused people because they're so focused on avoiding undermethylation that, they might be overmethylating without the ability to let the body buffer that.
Right.
And it's also required in creatine synthesis if you aren't supplementing creatine. If you are, then that really doesn't matter. And I think that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
So
What was the highest VO2 max you guys tested?
we've had people in the 60s. We've had people in the 60s, the low 60s. Those would be the
Low
highest.
60s. Interesting.
Yeah.
So it is. How many
It's
people
high.
did you test?
We've tested. I'm sure we've done thousands of tests at this point in time. So
Right.
yeah, having 65 is great. The highest ever recorded, if you're interested in that, was for a man, I think was in a Scandinavian cross country skier. And for a female, I think it was 90 or 91.
Oh, wow.
In a cross country skier. So just so people have a frame of reference. But 65 is very high. I mean, you could be an elite cyclist, you could be an elite distance runner with those kinds of numbers. There are other things that go into being able to be an elite runner or cyclist.
Right.
But you would have the cardiovascular capacity for that kind of activity. If you want to say, well, what's a husky, right? What's a husky? I think theirs is over 200, like 220, something.
Oh,
like that.
wow.
So this is why, you're not going to outrun a husky, but 65 is great. And the other thing is that people want to optimize their VO2 max, and which is a very admirable thing. And what we have found is that there's a lot written about optimizing VO2 max. Well, if you do interval training, that's the way to do it, right? If you do interval training, you'll boost your VO2 max. Or, we've had people that come in and say, well, I'm getting my cardio. I'm doing Orange Theory now, or my trainer has me, run for 10 minutes before we lift and then 10 minutes after we lift. And it's like, okay, great. Well, let's measure it. And in those cases, everybody's VO2 max goes down. Everybody's goes down. Right. And we're not biased in any way except having them have good VO2 maxes. And what we've learned is that it takes a combination of both sustained cardio, where you go out and you push yourself for 45 minutes or an hour, or by push yourself, I mean, go for a run or cycle. And then you have to do interval training on top of that. So the cake, if you will, that you're baking is protracted cardio, like Kipchoge, right? The guy that broke the 2-hour barrier in that staged race in Austria for the marathon. He's one of the world's leading marathoners. How do they train? Well, they go out and they run for 5 hours at a really slow pace, like 8 or 9 minute miles, right? And yet when they're running those marathons, they're running like 4:30 pace. And then they do tempo runs where they're running that fast or faster. And it's a combination of the two. They're building the base and then they're layering on the other stuff. So if people are listening to this and you'd like to build your VO2 max, you really need to incorporate both of those elements. And it's a very worthy goal. So we recommend doing, more protraction cardio 3 days a week and then 2 days a week doing interval training, which can be for 20 minutes, that kind of. I just finished an interval training session right now.
Interval training means like basically weightlifting?
No, interval training is, to your point, you can do interval training with weights, but the kind of interval training that I'm talking about is cardiovascular.
Like short sprints.
Right. So I did it on a machine called a VASPER, VASPER, that uses blood flow restriction. So I'm sitting in a device, moving my arms back and forth, my feet back and forth, and I have blood pressure cuffs, if you will, on my legs and my arms, constricting the muscles. So it's harder for blood to get in and out of the muscles, which increases the work of the exercise. And then I warm up for 4 minutes, and then I sprint for 30 seconds or a minute, or 45 minutes or 45 seconds. And then I take a breather for 90 seconds and I do it again. And today I was doing it with something called Live O2, where we're fluctuating the concentration of oxygen while I'm doing this. So I'm being oxygen deprived during some of the sprints, and then I'm getting higher than normal concentrations of oxygen at other times. This is a new thing that we're experimenting with to see if we can improve VO2 max even further, hacking into it this way. But it really, we've done this so much, and we've seen this over and over again over the last, 12 years or so that we've been testing this. And really, if people are serious about their VO2 max, do that protracted cardio and then do the interval training on top of it. So
you're making me more motivated here. So I actually wasn't, even though I was very into health, I wasn't working out in any serious way before, I would say like 7 months ago. More meaning like I wasn't paying a lot of attention to it. Like every day I need to work out or do exercise, not necessarily work out, but exercise. And so I changed a bunch of things. For example, I always run up the stairs, up or down the stairs. I always take my bike whenever I can. So, or walk, I more likely to play volleyball. I started lifting some weights, do push-ups. So that's kind of interval training as well, doing like 90 push-ups or something like that until exhaustion.
Sort of. It's not really, we wouldn't consider it cardio interval training. You do get your heart rate up for sure. But it just, when people have come to us and said, well, this is the kind of cardio training I'm doing, it doesn't translate into their VO2 max. That's what we've seen over and over.
Okay. So I think I need to incorporate, because I actually wasn't doing this in terms of like, I think I need to incorporate sprints. So quick sprints, stop for a minute, sprint, stop. Okay. So I wanted to emphasize how important VO2 max is just in the general scheme of things in terms of longevity, disease. In terms of longevity, it seems to me, based on what I've read, that VO2 max is the number one longevity metric out of anything else. Would you agree with that?
Well, let's just take a step back from that. So the real question that you're asking is and you didn't state it this way, but this is how I'm going to reframe it, is you're really asking, how old am I? And so we're using VO2 max as a marker for how old is our cardiovascular system. And then the extrapolation from what you said would be that it's a good metric to give you an overall sense of health. I will say this, that what we've discovered in our practice is that we're all a mosaic of ages. In other words, you have a chronological age, you have a VO2 max age, which gives you a cardiovascular age, but you also have a carotid age in terms of what's the thickness of your artery. You also have how long are your telomeres, a telomeric age. You have a DNA methylation age. You have, what's the senescent cell burden that you have in your body? What's the age of your bones based on bone density? What's your muscle mass? What's the age of your muscle mass? What's the age of your lung function, and on and on and on. What's the age of your brain? And so
Your kidneys. I love to say that as well, by the way. I'm in full agreement. I keep on, every time people ask me about, oh, what's your biological age? I'm like, I don't really believe in that, because it's like, there's so many metrics of biological age. Testosterone is a measure of biological age, right? It's something that goes
That's
down
right.
over time. Anything
That's
that
right.
goes down over time is a metric of biological age.
That's right. You're absolutely right. And I think it's wise of you to have come to that conclusion, because there was a lot of people, I think, out there misleading other people by saying, if you just get a DNA methylation age, this is your quote unquote biological age. And there are other algorithms out there that people can use too, right? Where you can get some fairly routine blood work done, and they'll run it through an algorithm, say, well, this is your biological age. And I think it does a tremendous disservice to people, because all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm chronologically, let's say I'm 56 or so. I'm not talking about me, but somebody comes in and says I'm 56 and my quote unquote biological age is 50. So I'm good. I'm doing really good. And yet what we find is that when we test other things, it's like, well, your telomeres make you 70 years old, right? Or your cardiovascular fitness is out of a 65-year-old. So what we find out is that really people are only as young as their oldest age, right? That's the thing that's going to take you out.
We overstress our nervous system, even just by things like getting light at night is a stress on the nervous system. And so, and just I feel like society's built in a very stressful way, urban living and working in an office and things like that. And so I think all these things kind of create a society that has much lower serotonin. And when you combine that with female hormones going down, you get like there's a lot of women that really feel like they're going nuts when their estrogen goes down.
Yeah.
And
And
so I think,
especially,
yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off. I just,
No,
to
no,
add
no.
to
Go
it,
for
when
it.
you mentioned like the stress, cortisol has such an impact on female hormones as well. So it just to add to it, it just compounds, especially as we get close to our period. If we don't have the progesterone we need, therefore we're not getting the GABA support. As you talk about, obviously GABA being our big inhibitory neurotransmitter, calming essentially, right? So we're missing out on progesterone. We have all this cortisol, which also can push down our progesterone. It from the brain, it just shifts our priorities, support stress, don't necessarily support progesterone. Serotonin is already on not doing great to begin with as a society. I totally agree with you there. And so we are more irritable, crazy, exhausted, negative, leading to our period. Absolutely. If nothing is done, if none of these things are recognized and then supported. And I find the women that tend to do the best are the ones who get this kind of, they get off their light at night. They do wear the blue light blocking glasses. They're working with their circadian rhythm. They're working with diet. They're working to lower inflammation. They're working with their stress management. We can't eliminate all the stress, of course. There's no way, but how we handle or how we decompress, et cetera, et cetera. And I do find the women who went from 10 out of 10 bad periods, self-reported as crazy or irritable or negative or awful, with time, they're like, oh, I'm so much better. I did have to make all these changes, but look at me now. And I love that. I love that it's modifiable. We aren't stuck with this.
For sure. And what I'm wondering is there a time period where, so let's say estrogen goes down, so a woman gets her period for 6 days or whatever it is. Her estrogen's lower. You mentioned she's not going to be as good at sprinting or heavy lifting, things like that. Is there any benefits during that period? Like, is there anything that
Actually,
improved?
that is the time. That is the time to sprint and lift and do that and do the stuff, because it is actually
Oh, okay.
okay. Yeah, that part is okay. It's the leading up to her period when her body, for lack of a better analogy, may or not be nesting, right? So she ovulates. This is a big also concept. Not every woman wants to be pregnant every month. Some do. I get it. Not every woman wants to be pregnant every month, but the body doesn't know that. So the body every single month does the cycle. Why? For reproductive purposes. Give you the option to maybe try to get pregnant if you wanted to. So every single month after you ovulate, release an egg, and the body's like, cool, there is a good chance if you wanted to get pregnant, cross your fingers, we could. So we're going to make the uterus as hospitable as possible. We're going to make it really welcoming. And in the process of building up and making it hospitable, it diverts resources away from you and towards the uterus and towards potential reproduction. So now in that time frame, if you go try to lift heavy, sprint long, run long distances, Peloton for an hour, you might find it's harder, tougher. You don't recover as fast. You're more prone to injury, or you just plain don't want to. You're like, I'm kind of tired. I kind of want to just, relax, stay home, not do these things. And it's for
I
good
see.
reason, because the body is shifting priorities. In the beginning, you get your period, the priority is a little different. And after ovulation, it's like, woohoo, we might get pregnant. So
So
that's what that's sort of how I explain it.
right. So during the period, I misunderstood that before. You're
Yeah.
saying that people can sprint and heavy lift better because they're not shunting resources to
Yes.
ovulation.
Yes. And
Okay.
the estrogen effect on like ligaments and muscles is different. Then as we get close to their period, then it shifts not for their period, the ovulation. As they get close to ovulation, estrogen goes way up, which has a different effect on ligaments and sprain strain, pulls, things like that. So right before ovulation, be a little careful. If you're doing box jumps, if you're doing explosive movements, I don't want you to get a sprain or a strain or a pull. Just be careful. And then after your ovulation, just dial it down a little bit, maybe be a little more nourishing. So do the power stuff in the beginning during your period, and then wind it down from there, and then start over again. Do the power stuff in the beginning, the first 10, 12 days, and then wind it down from there. Now, again,
And
all
during
of this is trainable. I'm not, people listening to this might go, this doesn't apply to me, or I'm a super athlete. It's as long as you recognize it, though, in your head, like,
Right.
oh, this might be why I didn't hit my PR today. My period's due in 3 days. Okay, got it.
So what's your heart rate and your heart rate variability from the Aura Ring? So I have that as well. I also use an Apple Watch.
This morning, my heart rate was ridiculously low, impossibly low for somebody my age, around 40 or 45.
Wow. And your heart rate variability?
And I'm going to bring it up and I'll show you. And my heart rate variability was something like 117, which is
117. Wow, that's incredible.
okay. Hold on there. I'm going to get these data for you.
107. So just
No,
while you get the data, I can't see it.
this
No, let's see.
heart rate, my variability was 111. I don't know.
111. That's incredible. Just to give people a context of heart rate variability, it is a general measure of health and how well your cardiovascular system works.
Yes.
And typically it goes down as you get older.
Yes.
Every year that you get older, it goes down a bit. And so, I've seen young people with the heart rate variability of like in their 20s. And
Yeah.
that's a problem. So my heart rate variability is typically 100. I would say that's what it's averaging on my Oura Ring. Sometimes it's higher. I think the highest it was like 125.
Let me mention another device. The near infrared. There are two key frequencies of near infrared that are bioactive.
Yeah.
I don't, you know about near infrared devices.
Oh, you better believe I know about near infrared, but I've got a couple that I have here. It was turning on.
Okay. Right.
I put this wherever you can put it on your brain. I had a knee injury. I just put it there.
Well, there's a real paradox because the infrared stuff works, and it works at the 2 key frequencies, but its penetration of the skin is very little. And I think what happens is that it activates mitochondria in the skin and in the upper epidermis, and that produces substances which affect your autonomic nervous system. But
the infrared does penetrate. It does penetrate. If you put it on the skin, it penetrates the near infrared.
if you look at the biology of it, the articles say that beyond 4 millimeters, that's to 3 or 4 millimeters, that's all it goes.
I'll tell you why I think it penetrates, because if I put it over here, like just on my forehead, or if
Yeah.
I shave my head and I put it on my head, I'm definitely able to notice there's cognitive changes from the infrared. There's no question about it.
Well, I'm agreeing with you. It works. It works. But I'm saying I think how it works is through a paracrine effect, which means an immediate, it works on the upper layers of the skin and the epidermis, activates the mitochondria. They put out signals that go deeper into the autonomic nervous system.
Another thing, IgG allergy tests.
Oh, I love that.
Get out of town. Like, are you kidding me?
Okay, I love it.
Who's so just racking up the hate mail? Everlywell. Come on.
Oh my gosh, tell me more.
So like, and they have great marketing, and they're in the UK and the US, and like you do your pinprick at home, and they test for foods that you're going to be sensitive to, and it's based on IgG rather than IgE, right? And IgE based allergy tests, they're gold standard, they're great. Get them done by a doctor who knows what they're doing, fine. IgG, as it is raised against foods, is part of a normal adaptive response. So when you do an IgG-based allergy test or intolerance test, the foods that you will see coming up against it that are positive are the foods that you eat regularly. And that is a perfectly normal thing. So what happens is, it's like, oh, look at all these foods that I eat that I'm intolerant to. I'm going to stop eating those. That is exactly the opposite of what you should be doing, because you're like, and then what will happen is you'll eat a whole bunch of different foods, and then you'll test again. And oh, look, these are the ones that now I'm producing IgG against, because it's part of a normal adaptive response to eating food. Because every time you eat, the permeability of the gut increases slightly. It's perfect, like it's normal. It's just like a part of the process. There are things that make it worse, and your general health makes it worse. And yes, I believe that pathological intestinal permeability is a thing. But in this setting, small increase in intestinal permeability as you eat, perfectly normal. And your body adapts to that and responds to that to make sure that you're getting appropriate immune responses or not. And part of that is producing IgG. And that's what you're testing with those tests. It's got nothing to do with allergies or intolerances.
Okay, I love that. Today, part of one of the tests that I looked at for the client was this IgG. He asked me, what do you think? I said, probably bullshit. I can't be sure, but probably bullshit. And we went through his results. He basically showed me that the things that are extreme, highest risk or whatever, is basically the things that he was eating the most of.
Yep.
Like, I actually do the best with these.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly what you just said. And in your practice, like you seeing clients, you notice that as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Again, like just all the time. And then, I work with some companies that, some testing companies as well. Thriver in the UK I work with, they do some at-home blood tests and some other things. And at one point, recently we were like, well, let's revisit, what can you do in terms of allergy testing? And so I went through it all again. Like, what's the evidence for IgG? And like, the evidence that there is that raising IgG against food is probably a good thing. It's like a good adaptive response to the foods you're normally eating.
Right, because that IgG actually creates the tolerance to those
exactly.
foods.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just so happy because I've literally always been thinking for the past 10 years, am I making a mistake not
blowing a whole bunch of money on all these tests. And then I've always just been super skeptical, so I didn't. And then now you're telling me that, now we're doing this. I'm like, oh, good thing I didn't go down this rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
So-
No, I mean, it's good to go down the rabbit hole, like stress test the research and stuff. And like, I'm always, I believe that the scientific process is the process of being less wrong over time, right? So stuff I'm wrong about now, I hope to find that out and be less wrong about it in the future. But as far as I can tell, I don't think we're wrong about that.
67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey, all while helping to keep us ad-free.